Good morning. We are going on the record at 9 a.m. on October 8th of 2022. Please note that this deposition is being conducted virtually. Quality of recording depends on the quality of camera and internet connection of participants. What is seen from the witness and heard on screen is what will be recorded. Audio and video recording will continue to take place unless all parties agree to go off the record. This is Media Unit 1 of the video recorded deposition of David Davis in the matter of Clay Coleman versus JetBlue Airways Corporation. This deposition is being conducted remotely using virtual technology. My name is Michael Yakovlev, and I'm the videographer. The court reporter is Elizabeth Love, both from Veritex Legal Solutions. Will counsels please introduce themselves and all parties they represent? After
Yeah.
the court reporter will swear in the witness.
Yes, for the plaintiff, Clay Coleman, Lee Seaham of the law firm of Seaham, Meltz, and Peterson.
Lillian Moon of Ackerman LLP for the defendant, JetBlue.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You ready?
Yes,
My
sir.
name is Lee Seaham. I'm with the law firm of Seaham, Meltz, and Peterson, and we represent Clay Coleman in this lawsuit that has been brought against JetBlue. Today, I'm going to be asking you questions which you will be responding to under oath concerning this matter. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
If you do not understand any of my questions, please let me know so that I can rephrase or repeat the question for you. Do you understand?
I do.
And do you understand that the deposition today is going to be transcribed by the court reporter and videotaped, and that everything you say here today will be recorded?
Yes, I do.
I'm going to ask you to please speak slowly and clearly so that the court reporter can take down what you say. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do you understand that your testimony today is given under oath as if you were in front of a court of law?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All of your answers to my questions must be given verbally. You cannot respond by nodding your head or shrugging your shoulders, since the court reporter cannot take down nonverbal answers. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Now, one of the purposes of this deposition is for our side to determine your knowledge of certain facts and events. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And if you subsequently testify in a different manner before a court, we will use the deposition to impeach your testimony. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. If you do not know an answer to a question, you should say that you do not know. I do not expect you to guess or speculate. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you ever testified in court before?
Yes.
Okay. And what what matter was that?
It was years ago. I was a hotel manager, and there was a crime that took place in one of the rooms.
Okay. And what hotel was that?
Red Roof Inn.
And what year?
I apologize. I don't remember.
Was it more than 5 years ago? Less than 5 years?
Oh, yes.
And what court did that take place in?
It was in Dedham, Massachusetts.
Is that have you testified in any other legal proceedings other than that matter?
No.
Okay. Have you ever testified in an arbitration proceeding?
No.
Have you ever been a party in a litigation?
No.
Have you ever declared bankruptcy?
No.
Do you understand that you have been sworn to tell the truth, and if you fail to do so, there could be adverse consequences?
Yes, I do.
Are you taking any medication or other drugs that today that might impair your ability to testify?
No.
Are you suffering from any kind of illness that might affect your ability to testify today?
No.
Are you currently under the care of any type of medical doctor for an illness that might impair your ability to testify?
No. Excuse me.
Do you understand everything I've said up until now?
I do.
Okay, could you please state your full legal names?
Certainly. It's David Rosenthal Davis.
And have you ever been known by any other names?
Yes.
Okay, what other name?
David Michael Rosenthal. and David Rosenthal Spearin, spelled Spearin.
Since what date? So your current name is David Rosenthal Davis, is that correct?
Yes,
And
sir.
since what date have you had that name?
That would be February of 2012.
Okay. And immediately prior to that, it was David Michael Rosenthal?
Immediately prior to that, it was David Rosenthal Spearin.
And how do you spell Spearin?
Spearin.
What span of time did you have that name?
From 2007 to 2012.
Okay, and then prior to that, your name was
David Michael Rosenthal.
that the name you were born with?
Yes, sir.
Did you review any documents to prepare for your deposition today?
Yes.
Okay, what did you review?
The documents that Ms. Moon sent over to me, just the statements, the history of the events, the witness statements.
When did you receive those?
Yesterday.
You did not review any documents prior to yesterday in preparation for your deposition?
No.
Did you talk to anyone besides Ms. Moon about your deposition?
No.
Okay, and before you now, do you have any documents other than the ones that Ms. Moon sent to you yesterday?
No, that's it.
All right. What is your date of birth?
December 20th, 1975.
And where were you born?
In Boston, Massachusetts.
And can you give us, dating from Boston, could you give us your various residences in terms of town and state where you lived?
Sure. Grew up in Randolph. I have also lived in Stoughton, Massachusetts. Taunton, Massachusetts. And Rentham, Massachusetts.
Where do you live now?
Davenport, Florida,
How long have you lived there?
since July of this year.
What was your residence prior to Davenport?
Kissimmee, Florida.
And how long did you live there?
From February 2017 to July of this year.
Oh, okay. And prior to Kissimmee?
Orlando.
And what was the span of your residence there in terms of time period?
2015 to 2017.
Can you describe your educational background for us?
High school diploma and some college.
What high school?
Randolph High School in Randolph, Massachusetts.
And what college did you attend?
Berkeley College of Music.
And how many semesters did you complete there?
Just 2.
What year?
1995.
Was JetBlue your first employment in the airline industry?
Yes.
Okay. When did you start working for JetBlue?
March 2nd, 2011.
And in what position?
In-flight crew member.
Is that otherwise known as a flight attendant?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. How long did you hold that position?
March of 2011 to November 2012.
Okay. And what happened in November 2012?
I was promoted to in-flight administrative supervisor in Boston.
And how long did you hold that position?
Until January 2015.
Okay. What happened in January 2015?
I took a position in Orlando as in-flight team leader.
So you moved from supervisor to team leader, is that correct?
Correct. It's team leader is also a supervisor, it's just a different job title.
Is that a higher position?
It's lateral.
Lateral. Well, what's the difference in terms of job functions between a supervisor and a team leader?
There really isn't any.
Oh, okay.
I had more direct reports as a team leader.
Were you a supervisor of supervisors?
No.
No?
I was a supervisor of flight attendants.
Okay. So you became a team leader January 2015 in Orlando, and how long did you hold that position?
Until September of 2020.
Okay, what happened in September of 2020?
JetBlue offered an opt-out package due to the pandemic, so I took it.
And what did you do after you left JetBlue?
Primarily volunteer work.
With what organization?
CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates, as a guardian ad litem.
A guardian ad litem?
Yes, sir.
And then you came back to JetBlue at some point?
Came back to JetBlue July of 2021.
And what position?
Customer support supervisor.
Okay, so you're no longer working with in terms of the supervision of flight attendants?
Correct.
Is there a reason why you did not return to the flight attendant workforce?
I had enough of that.
But why had you had enough of that?
Primarily, there's training you have to go through once a year. It's kind of stressful. It's called recurrent training. And I really liked the idea of working from home.
All right, so through the time period 2018 to 2020, you were an Orlando-based team leader, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And so the flight attendants would report directly to you?
Correct.
And to whom did you report during that period, 2018 to 2020?
The base manager. His name was Juan Ramos.
And did you work with a woman named Linda Reyes?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What position did she hold?
At the time, she was also an in-flight team leader.
Now, Mr. Coleman in the period 2018 to 2020 was an Orlando-based flight attendant, correct?
Correct.
And to whom did he report?
I believe he was on Linda's team.
But Mr. Coleman was Orlando-based, correct?
Yes, he was.
So how, or might he have, you said you believe he was on Linda Reyes' team, might he have been on your team?
He was not on my team.
No. And how does that get divided up, flight attendants, in terms of assignment to team leaders?
It's luck of the draw. I mean, Juan would assign the teams. I'm not sure if he had a rhyme or reason.
You knew Mr. Coleman as a flight attendant, correct?
I did. Yep.
And how did you come to know him?
Just from working in the office, he would come down to the crew lounge to report for trips.
And did you have conversations with him during this period, 2018 to 2020?
Yes, we would speak when he came downstairs.
Did you, was it common for you to discuss workplace issues with Ms. Reyes?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Did Ms. Reyes ever discuss Mr. Coleman's performance with you?
Not that I recall.
Now, as a team leader, what were your job duties?
Oh, Lord. In-flight briefings, one-on-ones with crew members, disciplinary actions. I was also part of the recruiting team. So lots of interviewing and recruiting, updating dependability files. I think that was the meat of it.
Well, what is a dependability file?
Just monitoring, making sure people are actually showing up for their shifts, making sure that they're on time for their shifts. There's a certain points program in place so that if you're absent a certain amount of times, it leads to progressive guidance.
What does the term progressive guidance refer to?
Basically a write-up. We had 3 different tiers of progressive guidance, which was initial, continued, and final.
I'm sorry, initial,
Continued
continued,
and final PG.
and what was the purpose of having those 3 tiers?
If I recall correctly, if you called out 4 times, that was for 4 different trips, that would be initial, just kind of a, hey, we see that you're calling out a lot. 4 more times would be continued. And then once you get to 12 absences, you're on a final PG.
Okay. Well, was the purpose of the progressive guidance policy to give a flight attendant an opportunity to improve his or her conduct so that she or he could retain his or her position?
Correct.
Now, so given your involvement in discipline, were you responsible for being knowledgeable of flight attendant rules of conduct?
Yes.
And you were responsible for enforcing those rules
Yes.
and monitoring compliance by flight attendants with those rules?
Correct.
And you would receive reports of misconduct and non-compliance with those rules?
Yes.
Were you ever disciplined by JetBlue?
No.
Would you agree that as part of your job, you were required to be intimately familiar with flight attendant duties?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the term federal aviation regulations?
Yes.
Okay, and have you heard of the reference to FARs?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the regulatory reference 14 CFR Part 121?
No.
No. Are you familiar with the fact that JetBlue is a Part 121 carrier?
No.
No. Are you familiar with the concept of safety management systems, or
Yes.
SMS? Yes. Okay.
SMS. Yes.
Okay. What's your understanding of what that consists of?
It's not vast. I know the term.
What's your best understanding of what that term refers to?
Just systems in place to make sure that safety is maintained.
Did you ever receive training in the JetBlue SMS program?
I do not recall.
Okay.
I'm assuming I must have, but
Under JetBlue policy and the FARs, would you agree with me that that flight attendant duties include ensuring cabin safety?
yes.
And that would be cabin safety both in the air and on the ground, correct?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree that the FARs specify a minimum number of flight attendants for a flight?
Yes, depending on the aircraft.
In 2020, there was a fluctuation in the total staffing of flight attendants at JetBlue, correct?
Correct.
And there were a high number of furloughs, is that correct?
Nobody was furloughed. They were voluntary opt-outs.
So the company had a program of promoting people to leave the company in order to reduce the staffing, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Now, the FAR mandated FA staffing relates to maximum payload capacity and seating capacity, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that flight attendants must complete training and qualification requirements of the FARs, correct?
Yes. Correct.
And that would include specific programmed hours, correct?
Correct.
And flight attendants must have airline type specific knowledge and skill requirements, correct?
Yes, sir.
And flight attendants are responsible for taking action during a wide variety of emergencies, correct?
Yes. Correct.
And flight attendants may be required to administer first aid, correct?
Yes. Yes. Correct.
Did JetBlue administer training to flight attendants with respect to administering first aid?
Yes. Yearly.
Do you recall what that consisted of?
CPR, the use of defibrillators. I can never say that word right. I apologize.
That sounded pretty good to me.
Chest compressions
Uh.
and assigning roles. For instance, if you have 3 flight attendants on a team, one is the communicator, one is in charge of action, one is in charge of bringing the equipment.
Okay, and flight attendants may be required to administer, oh, excuse me, I already asked that. Flight attendants are required to conduct aircraft evacuations when necessary, correct?
Correct.
And JetBlue provides FAA mandated training for evacuation processes?
Correct. Also annually.
Okay. And flight attendants, as required, are required to respond to in-flight fires, correct?
Yes.
What does their training consist of with respect to that issue of in-flight fires?
That's also done annually. I apologize. I'm not sure how it is done currently.
Mhm.
However, when I was in flight, there would literally be a fire out in a pit behind JetBlue University.
Mhm.
And we would have to don our safety equipment and put out the fire with the fire extinguisher.
Their flight attendants, aside from CPR, they're required to manage medical emergency, correct?
Correct.
And flight attendants are required to handle passengers who threaten the safety of other passengers
Yes.
and address passengers who are, and manage passengers who are unruly or disruptive.
Yes.
Do you know what the JetBlue training consisted of with respect to the handling of passengers who are unruly or disruptive?
When I was there, when I was in that department, rather, it was done via role play, if you will. One person would play the disgruntled passenger, and the team would have to cohesively work together to try to kibosh the situation.
Flight attendants at JetBlue also had to be prepared to respond to situations that could threaten passenger safety, correct?
Correct.
And that would include turbulent air, correct?
Correct.
And airplane decompression,
Correct.
potential hijacking, correct?
Correct. They didn't place too much emphasis on that, to be honest, because you need a code to get into the flight deck.
So the flight attendants did not have that code?
Flight attendants did have that code.
I'm sorry, they did have that code?
They did have that code.
Okay, I guess I don't understand your answer before. Why did JetBlue not place emphasis on hijacking training?
I mean, I can't really speak to that, but I don't remember specific training as it pertains to hijacking.
Okay. Flight attendants are required to know the location of emergency exits, fire extinguishers, and first aid kits, correct?
Correct.
And they must know the location of and operation of flotation devices, oxygen masks, and emergency slides, correct?
That is correct.
And the flight attendants are responsible for checking emergency equipment before each flight, correct?
Yes,
Flight attendants must also assess and verify the suitability of passengers that occupy exit row seating, correct?
that is correct.
Okay, and flight attendants must brief passengers on safety equipment, evacuation, and crash landing procedures.
That is correct.
And flight attendants must ensure compliance with applicable safety regulations, correct?
That is correct.
Would you agree that JetBlue flight attendants perform critical safety functions?
Yes, absolutely.
And would you agree that the FAA has designated the flight attendant position as a safety sensitive position?
Yes,
Would you agree that the flight attendant, and I think you might have alluded to this before, that the flight attendant position is a stressful job?
yes,
Now, in this period of 2018 to 2020, what were JetBlue's roles as they rules as they related to alcohol use?
certainly not. No alcohol, I believe it was 8 hours before your shift, a minimum. We did random drug and alcohol screenings where drug and alcohol compliance would actually meet the aircraft coming in and test random flight attendants. I mean, simply stated, it was obviously prohibited.
Okay. And could flight attendants also be tested on the basis of reasonable cause for drugs or alcohol?
Absolutely. We do have a reasonable suspicion policy. And there are certain crew members who are specifically trained in that.
Okay. But flight attendants, when they're staying over at a hotel, they're permitted to consume alcohol, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. But they can't consume alcohol within 8 hours before their next flight, is that right?
That's correct.
I'm not hearing anything.
You're not hearing anything?
Somehow I've lost the sound.
Would you like to go off the record to fix
Can
it?
everybody else hear?
Yes,
can
we
hear.
I can hear you, and the witness can hear me, and I can hear the witness.
Yeah, this is Michael, videographer speaking. Yes, I can hear and see everybody.
I've lost my sound.
Would you
I'm
like
gonna try to go out and come back in.
to go off the record?
Yes.
Off the record at 9:28 a.m. On the record at 9:31 a.m.
Okay. So flight attendants, when they're at an overnight stay at a hotel during a multi-day trip, they are permitted to consume alcohol, correct?
Yes, they are.
And are they one proviso or limitation is that they cannot have any consumption of alcohol within 8 hours of checking in for their next flight, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And is there any other limitation that you know of?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Now, and I think you said they can be tested based on reasonable cause. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And on what, did you have training on what constitutes reasonable cause for initiating an alcohol test?
Yes.
Okay, so what was your understanding of JetBlue policy of what would warrant the initiation of a test on a reasonable cause basis for alcohol?
It was usually called out by another crew member, maybe working with the individual. Could be confusion, slurred speech, certainly the smell of alcohol, erratic behavior.
Disorientation?
Correct. Disorientation, stumbling, confusion.
Have you, during your employment with JetBlue, had, putting aside Mr. Coleman for the moment, have you ever received or did you ever receive reports of flight attendants not complying with alcohol-related rules?
Me personally, just one time.
And what did those circumstances involve?
One of the flight attendants contacted the captain. The captain contacted the in-flight team leader office because this crew member was concerned about his coworker's behavior. So I met the flight.
Okay, and what happened when you met the flight?
I did not agree. I did not determine anything. I asked him a series of questions. He had something very personal that he was dealing with, so he apologized for his confusion, for lack of a better term. I did not smell anything. I did not notice any dilation in his eyes. That was his last trip, so I escorted him to the tram and off he went.
Okay, so you did not initiate a reasonable cause test in that case?
I did not.
And what had been reported to you in terms of any behavioral cues indicating alcohol use?
The person he was working with said that he kept asking the same questions over and over. He just seemed completely unfocused, which was out of character for him.
And was the person reported as being disoriented
No,
but unfocused, you say?
unfocused, and in the other crew member's opinion, he seemed very confused.
Now, you said that that was the one incident that you were directly involved with, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that and there was no discipline administered in that situation?
No,
Is that right? And the individual was just sent home?
correct.
Okay. And did you receive information about other incidents involving alcohol that you were not directly involved with?
Yes,
Okay, what incidents did you receive notice of?
there were two when I was back in Boston. One crew member was sobbing uncontrollably on the flight, also completely out of character. I was not the one that met that flight. I'm not certain what went on. And then there was another individual, a female, who was like basically stumbling all over the aircraft. So two supervisors met that flight.
Was that flight attendant the one who was stumbling, the latter incident, was she tested for alcohol?
They both were.
And what were the results of those tests?
That I do not know.
Were either of these individuals and is that in accordance with JetBlue policy? If someone stumbling around the aircraft, to test them for alcohol?
Not necessarily, but if it's reported by another crew member and it's a point of concern, then we will absolutely meet the flight.
And do you know the result that second incident? And I may have asked this, if I did, I apologize. That you say a test was conducted for that
Correct.
individual? And do you know whether the test was negative or positive?
I do not.
Do you know if that individual is disciplined or terminated?
I do not.
Or did she continue to work for the company?
I don't know. When I was in Boston, I honestly did not see many crew members because my office was separate from the crew lounge.
Okay. And you say the first incident involved a crew member who was sobbing on the aircraft, correct?
Yes.
You recall hearing of any other behavioral cues indicating alcohol abuse?
No.
Okay. And she was tested?
He was tested. Yes.
Oh, he was tested?
Yes.
And do you know what the test result was?
I do not.
Do you know if that individual would receive discipline of any kind?
I do not, but we are quote unquote friends on social media, and I know that he's still with the company.
Okay, what was his name?
I don't know how to say it, but it's Kony.
That's the
It's his
first name
first
or
name.
last name?
That's his first name. I don't know his last name.
He was a Boston-based flight attendant?
Correct. I'm not sure if he still is, but
Okay. Is there any limitation, provided that a flight attendant is not consuming alcohol during a layover within the 8-hour limitation, is there any limitation on how many drinks, alcoholic drinks they can consume at a hotel?
I don't think we have any set amount.
Okay. Is there any blood alcohol level limitation on the flight attendant in terms of consuming alcohol prior to 8 hours before the flight?
Not that I'm aware of.
But during your tenure as a flight attendant, would you have a drink, alcoholic drink at a hotel?
Sure. Absolutely.
Would you ever have a few drinks?
On occasion.
Okay. Have you ever witnessed a flight attendant become inebriated during a layover?
Yes.
When did that happen?
Oh God, I wasn't a flight attendant for very long, so I'm gonna say probably 2011.
Was that flight attendant discipline?
That flight attendant had a 24-hour layover.
Hmm.
So I honestly, to answer your question, I do not know.
How did you know, or how did you come to the conclusion that she was inebriated?
Just very loud and obnoxious.
Okay. All right.
So that's an assumption.
Yeah. All
I
right.
should- I should clarify
Was that at the hotel bar?
Yes.
Did you intervene to calm her down, or did someone intervene?
No, she wasn't necessarily disruptive. I just paid and left because I didn't want to be associated with it.
Okay. All right. Is she still working with the company?
I do not know.
No. Do you recall what her name was?
No.
Hmm.
I wish I could.
Have you heard reports of other flight attendants becoming inebriated during a layover?
Not that I recall. I'm sure I have, but I can't remember any specific instances.
Would you agree with me that it is important for a flight attendant to be in good mental health?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you recall what JetBlue's policy is relating to flight attendants and mental health?
I do not.
Well, would you agree with me that JetBlue's policy in this period 2018 to 2020 would be that if a flight attendant was in poor health, that they should not report to work?
Yes, absolutely.
And that would include being in poor mental health.
Yes.
Okay. Now, are with respect to flight attendant health issues that might impact the performance of their duties, are JetBlue managers required to be proactive and intervene where necessary?
If we receive reports of someone being, certainly suicidal or super anxious, I've actually had to meet aircrafts before where crew members were having panic attacks.
Okay. And you had to meet, I think you had to meet a flight where a flight attendant was reported as sobbing during the flight.
No, that was in Boston. I wasn't the one that met that flight.
Oh, okay. But if a flight attendant is having a panic attack or other visible mental health issue, managers are expected to meet the flight and intervene?
Correct.
and it was a JetBlue policy where a flight attendant was exhibiting significant mental health issues, that the flight attendant should be removed from duty until his or her condition could be evaluated.
Correct. And we would encourage them to reach out to Sedgwick, which is our business partner who handles our leaves, to apply for.
Is that an employee assistance provider?
That's separate. We do have an employee assistance provider, and it's called Navigator.
Okay. Okay, so I was presuming the wrong thing. So you referred to Sedgwick, is that right?
Correct.
And what service does Sedgwick provide?
Sedgwick is who you would contact to initiate a leave, whether it be an intermittent FMLA leave, continuous FMLA, short-term disability, or a personal leave. So Navigator is where we direct the crew member to, they will set you up with free therapy sessions. I believe it's 6 free, and then if you need more, you get an additional 6. And if necessary, while you're attending therapy, Sedgwick would be the one, if you wanted to take a leave, Sedgwick would be the one to assist with that.
And so it would be JetBlue policy if someone was having a mental health issue that they should be referred to Sedgwick to arrange for leave and some form of treatment?
It's recommended, it's not required.
Well, I mean, is it required that a JetBlue manager such as yourself during this period recommend that to the flight attendant?
Yes.
And if there's some suspicion of substance abuse, for example, would the same protocol be followed, that the flight attendant be referred to Sedgwick?
Correct.
Okay. And JetBlue would make allowances, whether it's mental health or substance abuse, would allow for leave for recovery from those conditions?
Yes. I mean, provided they weren't under the influence while operating a flight.
Okay. Well, a similar question I think I asked with respect to mental health, but with respect to if there's a suspicion of substance abuse by a flight attendant, is the flight attendant during this period, 2018 to 2020, with which you're familiar, where there was a suspicion of substance abuse, was it JetBlue policy to remove that flight attendant from duty until a determination could be made?
Yes.
And if the flight attendant, I think you were referring before to, there's random drug and alcohol testing and reasonable cause drug and alcohol testing for flight attendants, correct?
Yes.
And if a flight attendant tested positive for drugs or alcohol, what action would JetBlue take during this period, 2018 to 2020?
That is our zero tolerance policy. The crew member would be separated.
And when there are signs of alcohol abuse, a supervisor such as yourself is required or would have been required to initiate a reasonable cause test, correct?
If after our assessment, we agree with that conclusion that they need to be tested, then yes.
And until there's a determination as to whether the flight attendant has a substance abuse problem, the flight attendant would be removed from duty, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that would apply whether or not if there were a test involved, that removal would occur whether the test was a random test or a reasonable cause test, correct?
That is correct, with one caveat.
Yeah.
Try to make this as simple as possible. If there's enough time in between flights,
Hmm.
and it's a random test, they won't remove the crew member just to do the test. But if it's like if it's a 5-minute turnaround, they will have to get another flight attendant to replace that flight attendant while they're being tested, and they'd be pay protected.
But if it's a drug test, sometimes a drug test can take 3 to 5 days to get the results back, correct?
If I recall correctly, yes.
Okay. And if it was a reasonable cause test for drugs, that flight attendant would be removed from duty until they got a negative test result back, correct?
That is correct.
Now, when you were a team leader, you'd say your responsibilities would include the investigation of suspected violations of the rules of misconduct?
Crew relations handle the investigations.
Hmm.
So I don't know that that's accurate. I would just be, if it were my crew member, I would be updated as they got updates.
Okay, so do you have some familiarity with the investigatory process at JetBlue as conducted by crew relations?
Depending on the situation, quite frankly, minimal.
Mhm.
Excuse me.
Did you receive training from JetBlue with respect to the enforcement of rules?
Yes,
And when I say rules, I meant rules of conduct. You understood that?
yes,
Okay.
correct, yes.
And what
It's
what
all
did that
clearly outlined.
what did that training consist of?
That's on the job training. As soon as you become a supervisor, you work with another supervisor, going through what we call the crew member blue book. So again, yeah, it's mainly on the job training. It's nothing formal.
And did you receive any training from JetBlue with respect to disciplinary investigations?
Can you rephrase?
Yeah, you're familiar that in some instances JetBlue would conduct an investigation into alleged misconduct?
Correct.
Okay, and did you receive any training with respect to the proper investigation process or procedure?
Gotcha. No, no, I did not.
But you received some training in the concept of progressive discipline,
Correct.
right? And that progressive discipline was an element of JetBlue's policy when you were a team leader.
Yes.
Under JetBlue policy as it exists in 2018 to 2020, did JetBlue reserve the right to suspend a flight attendant from duty pending a disciplinary investigation?
Yes.
And that kind of suspension from duty, would that be applied where, in circumstances where the alleged misconduct would result in termination if the events were confirmed?
Correct.
Okay. Now, Mr. Coleman was hired by JetBlue in March 30, 2011, correct?
Yes, correct.
And so prior to his termination in 2020, he had worked with JetBlue for approximately 9 years, correct?
Correct.
And before that, he was a firefighter and paramedic for 20 years, correct?
Yes, that's what he told me.
Okay. And had he, prior to his termination in 2020, had he been previously terminated by JetBlue?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Had he previously suspended for disciplinary reasons?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did he ever receive a formal disciplinary letter?
That I do not know. I know that there was a social media issue. I'm not all that privy to it, but I'm not sure what the outcome of that was.
Okay. What did that social media issue consist of?
I only just read it. I believe it was something about the safety of the carts. We started using cart service on board the aircraft. And I guess he was just mentioning his disdain toward it from a safety angle.
Okay. And from whom did you get that information that you just testified to?
I got it from the paperwork that I got yesterday.
Oh, well, prior to yesterday, did you have any knowledge of this social media incident?
No, I didn't remember it at all.
Do you ever recall receiving any negative in-flight incident report from Mr. Coleman?
No, not that I recall.
Would you agree to me that coming into 2020, that you considered him to be an excellent flight attendant?
I had never worked with him, so I can't describe him as an excellent flight attendant.
Had you, aside from that social, well, I mean, you just learned about the social media incident yesterday. Had you ever received, prior to 2020, any negative reports concerning his conduct?
Yes.
You had received negative reports.
Yes.
Okay, what negative reports did you receive?
I had two flight attendants. I apologize, I cannot remember their names. They were female. They came to me and they said that they did not want to fly with him anymore.
And what year was that?
I apologize, I do not recall.
And did they state the reasons why they did not want to fly with him?
They found him to be aggressive.
Did they give any specific, did they describe any specific incidents?
Just argumentative, and that I remember specifically, one of them said that he was a hothead.
But did they describe the language, with specifics? Did they provide the language that he used?
I honestly do not remember that.
Okay. Other than, and these two flight attendants came to you together?
No, two separate incidents.
And you can't recall the year?
I cannot recall the year. I apologize.
Okay. And then other than these two flight attendants, did you receive any other critical reports of his performance as a flight attendant?
I did not.
Did you conduct any further investigation with respect to these flight attendant reports?
I did not. I referred them to, I said if it was serious enough, I told his supervisor, who for some reason, I don't think it was Landa at the time, but if it was serious enough and they felt unsafe, that they could place him on what we call the, I think it's called the do not fly list. Flight attendants can put people whom they don't wish to fly with anymore on this list, and crew services will do their best not to assign them together. It was nothing so egregious that I felt, it seemed to me to be some, like just a personality conflict.
So you conducted no further investigation of it, is that correct?
Correct. I directed them to the appropriate channels and
you never heard of any disciplinary action being taken in response to these reports?
no.
Now, you said that you would speak on occasion with Mr. Coleman at work,
Yes,
and where would these conversations take place?
normally in the crew lounge.
Would you frequently be in the crew lounge during work hours?
Yes, my office in Orlando was actually in the crew lounge.
And were your conversations with him friendly in nature?
Yes,
Was he? Did he ever act as a hothead or with you?
never toward me.
Was he ever argumentative with you?
With me personally, no.
Okay. You would also have text exchanges with him on occasion, correct?
The only text exchange that I recall was last year. I don't think we ever texted before that.
Okay. Did you ever socialize with him afterward?
No,
Did you ever criticize him for his performance as a flight attendant?
no,
Did you ever criticize him to others for his performance as a flight attendant?
no.
Prior to 2020, did you have ever have any reason to suspect Mr. Coleman of having a substance abuse problem?
No.
Did you ever receive, prior to 2020, did you ever receive any report from anyone else suggesting that Mr. Coleman had a substance abuse?
Never.
Issue? No.
No.
I'm sorry, never?
Never.
Okay. Isn't it true that there were, you received reports that he had acted proactively to save passenger lives on more than one occasion?
I never received that.
And you have no knowledge of any written discipline issued to Mr. Coleman prior to 2020?
No.
In 2018 to 2020, is it your testimony that Linda Reyes would have been his direct report?
Yes.
Isn't it true that Mr. Coleman complained to you on occasion that Linda Reyes had treated him unprofessionally?
I do not remember that.
Isn't it true that Mr. Coleman communicated to you on occasion that he was upset by the frequency with which JetBlue flight attendants and pilots made anti-Semitic remarks?
I do not remember. I'm not saying it didn't happen. There is one particular instance where he sent me an email that he was upset. I believe this was after the Pulse tragedy. He was upset that JetBlue was making such a big deal out of that, but there had been a bombing on a synagogue and JetBlue did absolutely nothing. That's the only instance that I remember.
You can't remember him complaining about flight attendants making anti-Semitic remarks relating to JetBlue passengers?
I do not remember. I know that it did happen though, because I read it yesterday,
Okay, all right.
but I do not remember him bringing them to me personally.
Okay. Did you have conversations with Mr. Coleman in which you, now, sir, you're Jewish, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you have conversations with Mr. Coleman in which you both self-identified as being Jewish?
Absolutely.
Okay. during those conversations, would you also discuss the shared experience of being Jewish at JetBlue?
Not at JetBlue specifically that I can recall. We used to use Yiddish words with each other.
Uh, You recall Mr. Coleman discussing with you the experiences of another Jewish flight attendant by the name of Susan Pfeiffer Jones?
Yes, I can't remember the conversation, but I do remember having a conversation about her.
Okay, and wasn't that conversation concerning her experience as being a Jewish flight attendant at JetBlue?
It may have been. I do not remember. I apologize.
You recall conducting any investigation into anti-Semitism at JetBlue as a result of the conversations with Mr. Coleman?
No.
Do you recall reporting to any other members of management any conversations you had with Mr. Coleman that related to anti-Semitism?
I do not recall that.
Isn't it true that Mr. Coleman on occasion communicated to you that he was subject to anti-heterosexual behavior from gay flight attendants?
No,
No, you don't recall that?
I do not recall that.
Is there any personnel within JetBlue who are dedicated to investigating incidents of misconduct relating to race, religion, national origin, or sexual orientation?
That should all be handled by crew relations. Grizel is, I think Camacho is her last name, and Wanda Garcia were the two people that in-flight worked with primarily.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Feel free to use the restroom, and we'll report it back at 10:10 or shortly thereafter. Is that okay with you, Mikhail?
Yeah, that's fine.
And with you, Beth?
Off the record at 10:05 a.m.